In the cold black between stars, the Krellian dreadnought Shadow of Vengeance drifted like a ghost, its hull scarred by war and its weapons still humming from the last battle it had won. Commander Zira Voss stood alone on the command deck, her tall frame wrapped in sleek black armor that shimmered like oil under starlight. Her violet eyes scanned the star charts before her with quiet focus. The mission was complete. Every human colony had been crushed, every ship destroyed, every signal silenced. The High Council had just sent the final message, all threats gone. Zira should have felt victory, but something sat heavy in her chest like a stone. She turned to her second-in-command, Kor, a massive Krellian warrior with 4 eyes and thick armored skin. Kor, what of Earth? The human homeworld Kor let out a low rumbling sound like stones grinding together. Earth was cleansed 3 cycles ago, Commander. Nothing left but dust and dead oceans. The last human signal was a scream. Then silence. Zira nodded, but her fingers twitched slightly against the console. She remembered Earth not as a planet but as a feeling sunlight on her face, the smell of wet grass, the sound of children laughing. She'd been taken from Mars when she was 6 years old. During the first great raid, her parents had hidden her in a storage unit, but the Krellians found her anyway. They did not kill her. They saw something in her sharp eyes, quick mind, fearless spirit. They took her to their training worlds, raised her as one of their own, taught her to fight, to obey, to forget. And for decades she had forgotten. She became the youngest commander in Krellian history, led fleets across the galaxy, crushed rebellions, silenced entire systems. She wore her new name. Like armor, Zira Voss, no trace of the human girl she once was. Lily Carter, a name buried so deep even she could barely hear it anymore. Yet now, with the war over and silence filling the void, a strange unease grew inside her. All threats gone, the words felt wrong, too clean, too final, like a story with no ending. She walked to the front of the bridge where a wide observation blister showed the endless stars. She stared into the dark and thought of Sol's system, that small yellow star with its blue, green planet spinning quietly in the distance. She had not thought of it in years, but now the memory returned like a whisper. Activate the whisper drive, she said suddenly. Kor turned his head sharply. Commander, set course for Sol. System. Kor stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. That sector is forbidden. The Council ordered total quarantine after the cleansing. No ship is allowed to go near it. I am not asking for permission, Zira said, her voice calm but firm. Kor hesitated, then bowed his head. Yes, Commander. The dreadnought folded space around itself and vanished. 3 days later it reappeared at the edge of the Sol system. Sensors swept the darkness, revealing the wreckage of old battles. Jupiter Station in ruins. Saturn's rings littered with debris and the silent graves of warships floating in eternal sleep. But then the scanners found it. Earth not dead, not burned, not Silenta. Living world turning gently in the sunlight. White clouds swirled over green continents. Blue oceans sparkled under the sun, and cities glowed along the coasts, not ruins but real cities. With lights movement, life. Zira stood frozen, impossible. She ordered a full diagnostic scan. Atmosphere composition, biosigns, energy output. The data poured in and confirmed the unbelievable. Humans were not just alive, they were thriving. Their technology had leapt forward. Compact fusion reactors, clean energy networks, self-healing materials, and something else. Something the Krellian sensors could not fully read. A soft energy field surrounding the planet, gentle but strong like a shield made of light. And Wilkor growled in disbelief. How they had nothing after the last assault. No fleet, no factories, no allies. We broke them. Zira did not answer. She watched as a small silver ship detached from an orbital platform and moved toward the dreadnought. It was not armed, not armored, just a simple vessel with smooth lines and no weapons. It stopped a safe distance away, and a voice came through the comms, clear, calm. Human, this is Captain Lisa Morgan of Earth Defense. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself and state your purpose. The voice carried no fear, only quiet strength. Zira stepped forward and opened a channel. This is Commander Zira Voss of the Krellian dreadnought Shadow of Vengeance. We were told Earth was destroyed. Pause, then the human voice replied. We rebuilt. How? Another pause, then softly, because we had to. Those 3 words struck Zira like a physical blow. She had spent her life believing strength meant destruction, that survival required crushing others. But this human spoke of rebuilding not with rage but with quiet determination. "I wish to speak with you." "Face to face," Zira said. After a moment, Lisa Morgan agreed. Zira removed her Krellian armor. For the first time in years beneath it, she wore a simple gray uniform she had kept hidden in a sealed compartment, a relic from her childhood on Mars. She stepped into the transfer pod and floated toward the human ship, her heart beating faster than it had in battle, inside the airlock of the silver ship. She took a deep breath and stepped through the hatch. Lisa Morgan stood waiting. A woman in her 40s with short brown hair, warm eyes, and hands that looked like they had fixed more things than they had broken. She wore a plain blue uniform with no medals, no rank insignia, just a small earth pin on her collar. "You are Krellian now," Lisa said. "Not as a question. I was taken when I was 6. Zira replied. "I did not choose this." Life. Lisa nodded, as if she already knew. Then she gestured to a large window showing Earth below. "Look at it. We lost billions in your war cities turned to glass. Oceans boiled dry. But we learned something from the ashes." "What did you learn?" "That survival is not about weapons or empires." Lisa said, "It is about memory, about choosing to plant a tree even when you know you might never sit in its shade." Zira looked down at the planet, green forests, sprawling cities, clean rivers, and for the first time in decades, tears filled her eyes, not tears of sorrow but of recognition. This was home, not the training pits of Krell, not the cold decks of warships, but this fragile, beautiful world spinning in the light. "How did you survive the final assault?" she asked. Lisa smiled faintly. "We did not fight back. Not in the way you expected. We stopped trying to beat you with bigger guns. Instead, we went underground. Literally, we built shelters deep in the earth, used geothermal energy, grew food in vertical farms, recycled every drop of water and every breath of air. We taught our children not to hate, but to remember who we were before the war. You did not seek revenge. Revenge would have killed us faster than your bombs." Lisa said, "We chose to live instead." Zira felt something crack open inside her like ice melting after a long winter. The Krellian doctrine had always said weakness must be erased, that mercy was failure. But here was proof that mercy could be the strongest choice of Al. "I cannot return to the fleet," he said softly. "They will see this as betrayal. You do not have to go back." Lisa said, "You can stay here with us, or you can go back and tell your people the truth, that humanity is not a threat to be destroyed, but a mirror to be understood." Zira looked at her hands, once used to give orders that ended worlds, now trembling with something new. Hope days passed as Zira stayed aboard the human ship. Learning, watching, listening, she walked through virtual recreations of old Earth cities, listened to music that had survived the war, read stories written by children who had never known peace but dreamed of it. She met scientists, farmers, teachers, all of them ordinary people who had done extraordinary things just by refusing to give up. Meanwhile, the Krellian fleet grew restless. Shadow of vengeance had vanished without word. Rumors spread through the ranks. Some said Zira had been destroyed. Others whispered she had gone rogue. The High Council sent urgent calls demanding her return. But she did not answer. Finally, she made her choice. She returned to the dreadnought not as a conqueror but as a messenger. She gathered her crew on the main deck. Kor stood among them, his expression unreadable. "I have seen Earth," she told them. "It lives not by weapons, but by will, not by fear, but by care. They did not fight us with fire, they fought us with life." Kor stepped forward. "Commander, you speak like a human. Perhaps I am remembering what I was before they made me forget." Zira said, "I will not lead another attack on Earth if the Council orders it. They will have to find another commander." Murmurs spread through the crew, some angry, some confused, but many thoughtful. The Krellians had never known a world that chose peace over power. It challenged everything. They believed Zira then did something no Krellian commander had ever done. She opened a public channel and broadcast her message across the entire empire. "Earth remains." The words rippled through Krellian space, sparking confusion, debate, even fear. But also something new. Curiosity back on Earth. Lisa Morgan stood on a hill outside New Seattle watching the stars. She knew the Krellian Empire would not change overnight. There would be more battles, more pain, But a seed had been planted, and seeds only needed time and care to grow. Zira stood on the bridge of the shadow of vengeance, now no longer a weapon, but a witness. She looked at the stars and for the first time felt not like a soldier, but like a bridge between two worlds. The galaxy held its breath, and somewhere deep in the void a lost girl finally remembered her name. Lily, and that was enough. Weeks passed since Zira Voss broadcast her message across the Krellian Empire. The words Earth remains had spread like wildfire through fleets and cities, sparking confusion, anger, and in some quiet corners, something far more dangerous: hope. The High Council reacted swiftly, branding Zira a traitor, stripping her of rank and ordering her immediate capture. But the shadow of vengeance had vanished again, slipping into the uncharted folds of space where even the Empire's best trackers could not follow. Meanwhile on Earth, life continued, not in fear but in careful preparation. Lisa Morgan and the Global Council knew the peace would not last. The Krellians would come again. Not with one ship, but with 100. With fire and fury meant to erase not just cities but the very idea of human resilience. Yet this time Earth was ready. Not with weapons alone, but with something the Krellians could not predict. Unity. Zira drifted in the void, far from both worlds, her mind a storm of memories and choices. She had left the Krellian fleet behind, but she could not leave her people entirely. They had raised her, shaped her. Even if they had done so with cruelty and control, she owed them truth, even if it cost her everything. She sent a message, not to the council but to the lower ranks, the soldiers, the engineers, the young cadets who had never questioned the doctrine. She told them what she had seen on Earth, not just the cities and the clean air, but the schools where children learned both math and kindness, the farms where food grew without poison, the hospitals where no one was turned away. She described Lisa Morgan not as a leader but as a gardener, tending to a world that refused to die. Some called her a liar, others deleted her message without reading it, but a few saved it, shared it, whispered about it in mess halls and barracks. The first cracks in the Empire's foundation had begun to show. Back on Earth, scientists studied the strange energy field surrounding the planet. They called it the resonance veil. It was not a shield in the traditional sense. It did not block weapons or deflect missiles. Instead, it seemed to weaken aggression, calm violent impulses, and strengthen empathy in those who entered it. At first they thought it was a fluke, but tests proved it real. The veil had grown naturally from decades of collective human intention, a psychic echo of billions choosing peace over rage. Even in the darkest time, Lisa believed it was the reason Zira had changed so quickly. The veil had reached out even to a ship in orbit and touched the human heart still buried inside the Krellian commander. Then the first Krellian scout ship arrived. It dropped out of warp near Mars, its sensors sweeping the system expecting ruin. Instead, it found life. The crew panicked, sent frantic reports back to the fleet. But before they could flee, a small human vessel approached. Not armed, not threatening, just present. The humans broadcast a simple message: "You are safe here if you mean no harm." The scout ship did not attack it, hovered in silence for hours, then turned and left without firing a shot. On the Krellian homeworld, Kor stood before the High Council, his massive form tense with unease. "Commander Voss's message has spread further than we thought, even among the honor guard. Some question why we destroy worlds that do not fight back." The Grand Marshal slammed his fist on the obsidian table. "Silence, traitorous thoughts have no place in this chamber. Voss will be hunted down and made an example of." But Kor did not bow his head as he usually did. Instead, he asked a question that had never been spoken aloud in the chamber before. What if she is right? The room fell utterly still. Days later, Kor disappeared from his post, leaving behind only a note: "I go to see for myself." He stole a fast courier ship and set course for Sol's system. Not as a warrior, but as a seeker. When he arrived, Earth's resonance veil washed over him like a cool wind. He felt something shift inside him, not pain, not weakness, but clarity. For the first time, he saw the Empire not as a force of order, but as a machine of endless hunger, always consuming, never satisfied. He landed not in a war zone, but in a field of golden wheat, under a clear blue sky. Lisa Morgan met him alone. No guards, no weapons, just a woman with kind eyes and a thermos of tea. "You are not what I expected." He rumbled. "And you are not what I feared," she replied. They sat together for hours talking, not as enemies, but as two beings trying to understand a universe far more complex than their teachers had told them. Meanwhile, Zira received a signal from Kor, simple and direct. "I see it now." Those 4 words meant more than any fleet surrenders. He knew then that change was possible not through war but through witness, but the Empire would not let go so easily. A full battle group led by Grand Marshal Vor himself jumped into the Sol system, weapons hot and hearts full of rage. They came not to talk, but to burn. Earth did not raise its weapons. Instead, every city, every village, every person turned on their lights at once, not for defense, but for welcome. Millions of voices sang together not a war chant, but an old human song of home and hope. The resonance veil pulsed brighter than ever, wrapping the Krellian ships in a soft golden light. At first the Krellians fired, but their weapons misfired. Their targeting systems blurred. Their rage turned to confusion, then to sorrow, then to tears. Vor screamed orders, but his own hands trembled. He saw not enemies below, but faces. Children laughing, elders tending gardens, people sharing food with strangers. His mind flooded with memories of his own youth before the Empire hardened him. Before he learned to see mercy as weakness, he ordered a retreat, not because he was defeated, but because he was seen. The battle group fled back to Krell space, broken not in body, but in belief on Earth. No one celebrated, they simply returned to their work, planting seeds, healing wounds, teaching the next generation that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of care. Zira watched it all from orbit, her heart full, not of pride but of quiet joy. She knew her journey was not over. The Empire would send more ships, more leaders, more tests, but each time fewer would come with fire and more would come with questions. Months later, she landed on Earth for the first time. Not as a commander, not as a spy, but as Lily Carter, the girl who had once played in the red dust of Mars. She walked barefoot on grass, felt rain on her face, heard birdsong for the first time in 50 years. Lisa found her by a lake watching the sunset. "You came home," she said. Lily nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes. They sat in silence as stars appeared. One by one, far away on the Krellian homeworld, schools began teaching new lessons, not just of conquest, but of connection. Engineers built ships, not just for war, but for travel. Artists painted, not just victories, but everyday moments of kindness. And in the highest tower of the capital, a young cadet played a human song on a flute. Her eyes closed, her heart open. The galaxy was changing, not with a bang, but with a breath, and it had all begun with 3 words. Earth remains. Lily knew she could never undo the pain she had caused, but she could spend the rest of her life helping others choose a different path. She started teaching, not just Krellians who came seeking truth, but humans who feared the unknown. She told them that monsters were often just lost people wearing armor too heavy to take off. One day a group of Krellian children arrived on Earth, wide-eyed and nervous. They had never seen trees or rivers or smiling faces that were not on a screen. Lily took them to a garden, showed them how to plant seeds, explained that growth takes time, patience and trust. One small Krellian girl looked up at her and asked, "Are we allowed to stay?" Lily knelt and touched the child's forehead gently. "You are always welcome here." That night, Lisa and Lily stood on a hill watching the stars again. "Do you think they will ever truly understand us?" Lisa asked. Lily smiled, not all at once, but enough to matter, and that was the beginning of something new. Not a human future or a Krellian future, but a shared one, built not on fear but on the simple, brave act of reaching out a hand and saying, "I see you." The stars above burned steady and silent, witnesses to a universe learning to heal in somewhere in the dark. A lost girl finally found her place, not between 2 worlds but within both. The end of part 2. Months turned into a year, and the quiet shift that began with Zara's return to Earth grew like roots beneath the soil, unseen but strong. The Krellian Empire still stood its towers, tall, its fleets vast, but something inside it had changed. Not all at once, but in small ways. A soldier refusing an order to burn a village. A scientist sharing data with human researchers. A poet writing verses about green hills instead of battle cries. Earth. Lily Carter no longer thought of herself as Zira, Voss the name felt like an old uniform she had outgrown. She lived in a small house near the Pacific coast where the air smelled of salt and pine. Each morning, she walked barefoot on the damp grass, and each evening she watched the sunset paint the sky in colors she once believed extinct. She taught now not in war rooms but in open fields and quiet classrooms. Her students were both human and Krellian young minds, eager to learn not how to conquer, but how to connect. She showed them how, to listen not just with ears but with hearts, how to speak. Not to win but to understand. Lisa Morgan visited often, bringing tea and stories from the Global Council. The world was healing faster than anyone expected. Cities, once divided by fear, now shared resources, knowledge, and festivals. The resonance veil still hummed around the planet, not as a weapon but as a reminder that peace was a choice made every day by ordinary people. But peace was not without its trials. Deep in the Krellian outer colonies, a faction rose, calling themselves the Iron Claw. They rejected the new ideas they called Zira, a traitor, and Lisa, a deceiver. They believed the only way to save the Empire was to destroy Earth completely before its weakness spread. Further, they gathered ships, old warriors, and those too afraid to change. Their leader was General Torvak, a veteran of 100 wars. His body scarred, his mind hardened by decades of belief that strength meant control. He did not ask for permission, launched his fleet in secret, 30 warships, dark and silent, slipping through dead zones in space, where the Empire's eyes did not watch his target Earth. And the woman who had poisoned their greatest commander, Lily, felt it before the sensors. Did a cold ripple in the veil like a stone dropped in still water. She stood on the shore that night, her eyes on the stars, knowing what was coming. She did not sound an alarm. Instead, she sent a single message to Kor, who now lived in a quiet valley on Earth, teaching Krellian children how to grow food rather than wield blades. "They are coming," Kor replied within minutes. "I stand with you," so did others. Former Krellian soldiers, engineers, pilots who had tasted Earth's peace and could not go back. They gathered not with weapons but with voices ready to speak to their brothers and sisters in the oncoming fleet. When Torvak's armada dropped out of warp near the moon, they expected silence or fear. Instead, they found a line of small ships waiting, not armed, not shielded. Just present at the front was Lily in a simple vessel. No armor, no rank, just a woman with open hand. Torvak's voice boomed across the comms trader. "You have led our people astray with lies of peace and softness. You will die for your betrayal." Lily did not raise her voice. She simply said, "I am not your enemy. You are the enemy of everything the Empire stands for." "No," she said gently. "The Empire stands for fear. You stand for fear. I stand for something else." Then she did, something no warrior had ever done. She opened her ship's comms wide and broadcast not a threat but a song. It was an old human lullaby sung by children from every continent. Voices blending in harmony, simple words about stars, dreams, and coming. Home. The resonance veil pulsed in response, wrapping the Krellian fleet in its golden light. At first, Torvak roared orders to fire. But his crew did not move. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Not out of weakness, but because they remembered something. They had long forgotten the feel of a mother's hand, the sound of rain, the quiet joy of a shared meal. Torvak screamed, but his voice cracked. He looked at his own hands and saw not a warrior, but a tired old man who had spent his life building walls instead of bridge. His ship powered down. The entire fleet followed. Lisa watched from Earth's surface, her heart pounding. Not with fear, but with hope. The Iron Claw did not attack. They listened. For 3 days, the fleets floated in silence. Lily and her small group of former Krellians spoke with Torvak and his officers not as enemies, but as lost kin. They shared food stories, memories of home before the Empire taught them to forget. Torvak did not apologize, but he wept, and that was enough. He ordered his fleet to return to Krell space, not to fight, but to speak, to tell the truth that Earth was not a threat, but a mirror, and that the real enemy was not humanity, but the fear that had ruled them for generations. Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet. People lit candles, planted trees, and held hands under the stars. They knew the victory was not in defeating an enemy, but in helping one find their way home. Lily returned to her house by the sea. But she was not alone. Torvak chose to stay. He built a small cabin not far from hers and spent his days walking the shore, learning the names of birds and flowers. He taught human children about discipline, not as control, but as care. And in the evenings he sat with Lily and Lisa drinking tea and watching. The waves, the Krellian Empire did not fall. But it began to bend. Schools added new subjects. Empathy, history of other worlds, ethics of power. Artists painted murals, showing Krellians and humans planting trees together side by side. Engineers designed ships that could carry families, not just soldiers, and in the capital city, a new monument was raised. Not to a warrior, but to a teacher. Meanwhile, Earth sent its first peaceful envoy to Krell space, not to conquer or convert, but to share seeds, medicine, and music. The ship was called the Dawn Singer, and its crew included both humans and Krellians who had chosen a new path. Lily did not go with them. Her work was here on the ground with the young, the scared, the broken. She knew real change did not happen in grand speeches, but in quiet moments. A child learning to trust a soldier, learning to cry a leader, learning to listen. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lisa joined her on the porch. "Do you ever miss the stars?" she asked Lily. Smiled. "I'm under them every night, but not out there. I was never meant to rule the stars." Lily said softly, "I was meant to remember what it feels like to be human, and to help others remember." They sat in comfortable silence, far above the resonance. Veil shimmered like a gentle breath around the planet. Not a wall, but a welcome. In the years that followed, more Krellians came. Not as invaders, but as guests. They learned to farm, to paint, to laugh without shame. Human children learned Krellian songs, and Krellian children learned to swim in Earth's oceans. The galaxy watched in awe, not because of weapons or empires, but because two broken peoples had chosen to heal together. Lily grew older. Her hair turned silver, her steps slower, but her eyes remained bright with purpose. She wrote books not of war but of wonder. She told stories of a girl who was lost and found, of a planet that refused to die, of a universe that could change if only one person dared to be kind. When she passed many years later, it was on a quiet morning with the sound of the ocean in her ears and the sun on her face. They buried her under an oak tree planted by her own hands, and on the day of her funeral, ships from a dozen worlds gathered in orbit, not to mourn, but to honor. They turned off their engines and let silence fill the void. Then one by one they played the lullaby she had broadcast to Torvak's fleet. The song drifted through space, carried on solar winds and starlight. On Krell, a young girl heard it through her window and asked her mother, "Who was that?" "That was Lily Carter." The mother said, "She taught us that strength is not in destroying, but in daring to hope." And so the story continued, not with an end, but with a beginning, for in the heart of every being, no matter their shape or origin, lived the same quiet truth. Hearth remains, and so does kindness, and so does courage, and so does love. The stars above burned steady, and somewhere in the dark, a little girl laughed as she planted her first seed, knowing it would grow. Not because the world was perfect, but because someone had chosen to believe it could be. The end of Part 3. 10 years after Lily Carter's passing, the world she helped heal had grown quieter, not in silence, but in peace. The resonance veil still hummed around Earth, not as a shield, but as a song, a gentle reminder that kindness could be as strong as steel. Cities no longer built walls but gardens. Schools taught not just science and math, but how to listen, how to forgive, how to hold space for grief and joy alike. On the Krellian homeworld, change had taken root deeper than anyone expected. The Empire still existed, but it was no longer an empire of conquest. It had become a union of worlds bound not by fear but by choice. Trade routes carried not weapons but seeds, art and stories. Former warships now ferried students and healers between stars. And in the capital, a new council sat not of generals but of teachers, farmers, poets, and elders. Yet peace, like all living things, needed tending, far beyond the known systems in the cold dark, where even Krellian scouts rarely traveled. A new signal, pulsed not from a ship or station, but from something older, something watching. It called itself the Watcher. Its message was simple and cold. Your peace is weakness. You will fall. The signal reached both Earth and Krell at the same time, sparking fear in those who remembered war and curiosity in those who believed peace was not the end, but a beginning. Lisa Morgan, now in her 70s, still sharp and steady, stood with core now gray around the eyes but calm as ever in the Earth Council chamber. They listened to the recording again and again. It is not a threat, Cor said finally, it is a test of what Lisa asked, whether peace can stand when challenged. They decided not to hide, not to arm themselves, not to panic. Instead, they sent a reply, not with weapons or warnings, but with an invitation. You are welcome to come see for yourself. Months passed with no answer. Then one day a ship appeared at the edge of the Sol system, unlike any design seen before. Smooth black surface. No weapons, no markings. It drifted silently just outside the resonance veil. Earth sent a small vessel to meet it. Lisa herself piloted it now, more grandmother than soldier, but still carrying the quiet strength that had helped rebuild a world. She stopped a safe distance away and opened a channel. This is Lisa Morgan of Earth. You are not alone here. For a long time there was silence. Then a voice came through. Not harsh, not cold, but tired. We have watched your kind for centuries. You rise, you fall, you destroy. You rebuild, you never learn we're learning? Lisa said gently, just slowly. The ship powered down its engines and drifted closer. Its pilot stepped out. Not a warrior, not a machine, but a being tall and slender with skin like polished stone and eyes that held the weight of ages. Its name was Elara. She came not to conquer, but to understand for generations her people. The Vera had watched civilizations bloom and burn. They believed peace was a dream that always ended in fire. They had long ago sealed themselves away, choosing isolation over the pain of connection. But Earth had done something no world had ever done. It had chosen peace after total ruin, not once but again and again. Elara stayed. She walked Earth's forests, swam in its oceans, sat. In classrooms and kitchens she spoke with farmers, artists, elders, and children. She saw how humans and Krellians worked side by side, not as former enemies but as friends. She asked Lisa, "Why do you trust so easily?" Lisa smiled. "We do not trust easily. We choose to trust anyway." That answer stayed with Elara. She returned to her ship, not to leave, but to call her people. Come see. Many refused, but some can meet first. They kept their distance, watching from orbit, wary of the veil, wary of hope. But then a young, Faerun child fell ill during the journey. Earth sent healers, not asking for anything in return. They saved the child. That small act cracked the wall. The Vera began to land not as observers but as guests. They shared their own stories of loss, of silence, of worlds they had watched die from afar. They spoke of the loneliness of forever watching but never touching. Lisa and Cor listened, and in listening they gave the Vera something they had forgotten. They gave them belonging. Years passed. The Vera did not join the Union, but they opened their borders for the first time in 10,000 years. They shared their knowledge of deep space navigation, ancient star maps, and ways to heal minds broken by time. In return, Earth and Krell shared music stories, and the simple joy of shared meals. Peace was no longer just between two species but three, and it kept growing on a quiet morning. Decades later, a young human girl named Maya stood on the same hill where Lisa once watched the stars. She was 10 years old, with bright eyes and a heart full of questions. Beside her stood a Krellian boy named Torin, and a Varen girl named Naya. They were classmates at the new Interworld Academy, where children learned each other's languages, songs, and dreams. "Do you think we will ever fight again?" Maya asked. Torin looked at the sky where ships from 3 worlds moved in quiet harmony. "I hope not. But if we do, I hope we remember how to stop." Nia touched the resonance veil with her hand. "It feels like Lily's voice," she said. "My grandmother says she sang to the stars." They sat together as the sun rose, painting the sky in gold and pink. Fair below in the valley, a new school was being built, not with stone or steel, but with wood grown from seeds brought from all 3 worlds. Inside, the classroom walls were covered in drawings, not of battles, but of hands holding trees growing and stars connecting. Peace was not perfect. There were still arguments, still misunderstandings, still moments of fear. But now when fear came, they did not reach for weapons. They reached for each other, on the Krellian homeworld. A statue stood in the center of the capital, not of a warrior, but of a woman with open hands, her face kind, her eyes looking toward the stars. It bore only 2 words: "Earth remains," and beneath it in smaller letters added years later. So do with a watcher had become a friend, and the galaxy learned that the strongest civilizations were not those with the biggest guns, but those with the biggest hearts. Maya looked at her friends and smiled. I want to be a teacher like Lily. Torin nodded me too. You took their hands and together they walked down the hill toward the school where the next lesson was about to begin. It was a simple lesson. How to say hello in 3. Language show to share your lunch. How to say I am sorry. How to listen. These were the tools of the new age, not swords or shields, but words and care. And as the children entered the classroom, the resonance veil pulsed softly above them, not as a barrier, but as a lullaby sung by a woman long gone but never forgotten. The stars watched, and for the first time in a very long time they felt hope, not because war had ended, but because love had finally learned how to speak, and that was enough. The end of part 4. 50 years after the last war, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Peace was no longer a fragile idea, but a living practice taught in schools, shared in stories, and carried in the quiet choices of everyday life. Earth remained, at the heart of it not as a ruler but as a home, a place where beings from a dozen worlds came to learn how to heal, how to listen, and how to grow together. The resonance veil still wrapped the planet, not stronger but softer, like a breath shared. Between friends it no longer needed to push away violence because violence had lost its hunger. The old ways of conquest had faded not by force but by choice, replaced by a new understanding that true strength came from connection, not control. In a small village nestled between green hills and clear rivers, a young woman named Eli rose with the sun. She was human by birth, but her family tree held roots from 3 worlds. Her grandmother had been Krellian, her grandfather Varen, and her mother, Earthborn. Eli had never known war, only the stories passed down in hushed voices around evening fires. Stories of Lily Carter, Lisa Morgan, and Core, the ones who chose to reach out instead of strike down. Ellie worked in the Seed Library, a place where plants from 100 worlds were stored, studied, and shared each morning. She checked the growth chambers where alien vines curled around human oak saplings and Krellian moss bloomed beside Earth wildflowers. Her job was simple, but vital. Keep life. Growing keep stories alive today was special. The first delegation from the Outer Rim worlds had arrived, not as enemies or even strangers, but as students. They came from systems long cut off by old wars and fear. They had heard rumors of a place where former enemies farmed side by side and wanted to see if it was true. Ellie greeted them at the gate, not with speeches but with tea and bread made from grain, grown in shared fields. The visitors were nervous, their eyes darting, their hands clenched, but slowly they relaxed as they saw children of all kinds playing in the square, laughing in a mix of languages. One of the visitors, an older man named Joran, spoke softly. Is it real? Or just a dream you have built here? Lai smiled. Dreams are real when people live them every day. She took them to the memory grove, a quiet place where trees bore small plaques, not with names of warriors, but with words like forgive, remember, share, and try again. This is where we honor those who chose peace. Even when it was hard, she said. Joran touched one of the plaques, his eyes wet. This is not how my people were taught. Then maybe it is time to teach something new, Eli said gently. Meanwhile, high above in orbit, the old Krellian dreadnought Shadow of Vengeance floated not as a weapon but as a museum, its halls now filled with exhibits not of battles but of bridges, moments when enemies became friends, when fear turned to trust. The ship was maintained by volunteers from all species, including Torin, the grandson of General Torvak who once led the Iron Claw. Now Torin taught young cadets that the hardest battles were not fought in space but within the heart and earth. Lisa Morgan was long gone, but her legacy lived in every open door, every shared meal, every time someone chose kindness over suspicion. Her old house by the sea was now a retreat for leaders from across the galaxy, a place to rest, reflect, and remember why peace mattered. Back in the village, Eli sat with Joran under a wide tree. As dusk fell, "Why do you help us?" he asked. "We have nothing to give you." "You give us hope," she said, "just by being here, by choosing to see for yourself instead of believing old fear." She looked at the stars beginning to appear one by one. "My people have been alone so long, you do not have to be alone anymore." That night the visitors stayed in homes offered freely by villagers. No guards, no contracts, just trust-be mourning. Something had shifted. Joran asked if his people could send their children to study. At the Interworld Academy. Not to learn weapons, but to learn how to build. How to heal. How to live, Ailey said. Yes, and so the circle grew wider. Years passed. The Outer Rim worlds joined the Union, not with treaties signed in blood, but with seeds planted. In shared soil, schools opened hospitals, exchanged knowledge, and artists painted murals showing not just their own stories but the stories of other. Peace was not perfect. There were still moments of tension, misunderstandings, old wounds that ached, in silence. But now there were also councils of elders from many worlds who sat together not to assign blame but to find healing. There were festivals where music from a dozen cultures blended into something new and beautiful. There were marriages, between species not for politics but for love. Ailey grew older, her hair turning silver, her steps slower, but her heart just as full. She never sought fame or power. She simply showed up each day, watered the plants, listened to the young ones, and told the old stories so they would not be forgotten one evening. As she sat on her porch, a young girl came running up breathless. They found something in the deep archive, a message from Lily Carter. No one has heard it before. Ailey's heart beat faster. They gathered in the village hall where a small old data chip was placed in a reader. The room fell silent as Lily's voice filled the air, soft, clear, and full of warmth. If you are hearing this, then you have kept going even when it was hard. Even when you were afraid, even when the world felt broken. Remember this: peace is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of care. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to try again tomorrow and the next day and the next. That is how light grows. In the dark, tears filled many eyes, not of sadness but of connection. They had not been forgotten, and they were not alone. The message ended, but its echo remained. The next morning, the whole village gathered to plant a new tree in the memory grove. They called it the Lily Oak. Its leaves shimmered silver in the sun as they worked side by side, human Krellian, Veyron, and Rimborn. A soft hum rose in the air. The resonance veil pulsed gently. Not in warning, but in welcome, far out in the void, where the galaxy met the unknown. A new signal appeared, not of threat, but of curiosity. A young species just learning to reach the stars sent a simple message. Who are you? Earth replied, not with pride, but with openness. We are those who chose to heal. Come learn with us. And so the story continued, not with an end, but with an ever-widening circle of hands reaching out across the dark. Not to conquer, but to connect. I watched the sunrise, her heart full. She knew she would not see all the changes to come, but that was all right because others would, and they would carry the light forward, one small act of kindness at a time. The stars above burned steady, and somewhere in the quiet a child laughed as she shared her bread with a stranger, and that was enough. The end of Part 5.